Hi boys and girls, today we're going to be reading Chapter 12, The Fairy Kingdom in the Land of Stories, The Wishing Spell. Alex and Connor emerged from underground between a tree and a big rock. They were covered in dirt and cobwebs and were breathing hard and sweating profusely. It had been so stuffy in the tunnel. "We made it," Alex said. "We're at the surface." "I never thought I'd be so happy to see the sun in the sky," Connor said. It was sometime around noon, and the twins had found themselves in a pleasant grassy field next to a perfectly groomed path. "Is that the path that we should have taken after the Red Riding Hood Kingdom?" Connor asked. "Yep," Alex said, looking down at the map. "But think of all the fun that we would have missed out on." They shared a laugh. The twins brushed themselves off and headed down the path. They felt very safe in this place. All the trees and fields were perfectly manicured and very inviting. Then again, anything would have seemed inviting after narrowly escaping a lifetime of slavery for trolls and goblins. "Are we positive we're on our way to the fairy kingdom?" Connor said, looking around. "I'd say it's very possible," Alex said, but she wasn't looking down at the map. "How do you figure?" Connor asked Alex. "Well, that's an indication," Alex said, and pointed. Grazing around a perfect little stream ahead of them, to their amazement, was a herd of unicorns. They were beautiful, white with silver horns, silver hooves, and silver manes. Connor's forehead wrinkled and his mouth dropped open. "Oh, geez," he said. "That is the most obnoxious thing I've ever seen in my life." "I want to pet one," Alex said, and ran toward them. "Alex, be careful," Connor said. "They could have rabies." "Unicorns don't have rabies, Connor," Alex said. "You don't know where those horns have been," Connor called out. Alex walked up to the herd, slowing her pace so that she wouldn't spook them. They were so majestic and graceful. She just had to stop and admire them for a moment. One saw her and walked toward her. Any sane person would have been scared by a wild animal approaching them, but Alex wasn't. For whatever reason, she knew the unicorn wasn't going to harm her. It lowered its head and she pet its face. Connor walked up and stood just behind her. All the other unicorns slowly surrounded them. "Alex," Connor said, "this is making me nervous." The unicorns formed a perfect circle around the twins and bowed to them. Alex smiled from ear to ear. Connor raised a suspicious eyebrow. "This is kind of trippy," he said. "Maybe they're welcoming us to their kingdom," Alex said. The unicorn stood still, as if frozen, and didn't show any sign of moving. Connor grabbed Alex's hand and they left the circle and rejoined the path. The stream traveled beside the path as the twins traveled down it. "Is it just me, or is that water sparkling?" Connor asked. He was right. The farther they walked along the stream, the more it appeared to glow and shimmer. "That must mean we're getting close," Alex said happily. "That's Thumbelina's stream. It should take us right into the fairy kingdom. I say we grab a hold of the first fairy that we can find. Call her names like oversized insect or fish bait until she cries," Connor said. "That's how we'll get her tears." "No, we should come up with a really sad story to tell," Alex said, and then a thought occurred to her. "How are we going to collect the tears once we've found them?" Connor shrugged. "Maybe we'll have to kidnap a fairy and keep her around until we need her to cry. What does the journal say to do?" Alex opened the journal and found the section about the fairy kingdom. Acquiring a fairy tear is not an easy task. "Surprise, surprise," Connor said. "Since fairies for the most part are very happy beings, it will be hard to find one so overcome with grief that it's brought her to tears. However you manage, hopefully under moral conditions, you can use this vial hidden inside the journal's spine to contain the tear." Alex turned the book on its side and looked closely through the hole where the pages were connected to the spine. Deep inside the journal's spine was a glass vial with a cork stopper. "Look at this," Alex said, pulling the vial out of the spine. "It says to put the tear in the vial." "Great! Now all we need is an emotional fairy," Connor said. Alex stopped walking. "Do you hear that?" she said. Tiny sniffling sounds came from close by. The twins looked around but couldn't see quite where it was coming from. "What is that?" Connor asked. He looked down beside him and had to blink a few times to make sure he wasn't imagining what he saw. "No, this can't be real. This is too easy. Nothing can be that easy." "What are you talking about?" Alex asked. Connor turned her shoulders to face what he was looking at. Sitting on a rock on the side of the path was a fairy, and she was crying. She was only a few inches tall and had big blue wings, similar to a butterfly. She had dark hair and a purple dress made of leaves and shoes made out of flower buds. Her tiny hands were clasped together around her big eyes, and tears were running down her face. The twins just stood there and stared down at her. They were afraid their minds were playing tricks on them. They both wanted to see this so badly. "What are you looking at?" the fairy said to the twins in a tiny, high-pitched voice. "We're sorry," Alex said. "Why are you crying?" Connor jerked his head toward his sister, and she knew what he was thinking. "Who cares? Get the tears." "That's none of your business," the fairy said, and sobbed some more. "Forgive me," Alex said. "I can tell that you're very upset about something, and I wouldn't be myself if I didn't ask if there's anything I can do to help." "That's sweet, thank you," the fairy said, changing her attitude. "I'm just having a very rough day, that's all." Connor kept trying to grab the vial from his sister's hand, but she wouldn't let him have it. "What's your name?" Alex asked the fairy. "Trix," the fairy said. "Hello, Trix. My name is Alex, and this is my brother Connor," Alex said. "Would you like to talk about what's troubling you?" Connor was shocked. She was actually more interested in helping this fairy than collecting one of her tears. "My trial is in a few minutes, and I'm scared," Trix said. "Your trial?" Connor asked. "Did you kill somebody?" "Of course not," said Trix. "I used magic on another fairy, and now the fairy council may ban me from the fairy kingdom." "I'm so sorry to hear that," Alex said. "What did you do to the other fairy?" Connor asked. "I turned her wings into prune leaves," the fairy said, and cried some more. "It was only for a moment. I turned them right back, but he was provoking me. He kept teasing me about my size." "They're going to ban you from the entire kingdom for turning someone's wings into leaves for a couple of seconds?" Connor asked. "They've been very strict ever since the enchantress put the curse on the sleeping kingdom," Trix said. "The fairy council believes that every fairy is a representative of their order and should act as such." "Those are high expectations," Alex said. "I can't leave the fairy kingdom," Trix cried. "It would be so lonely. Oh, and I hate being alone. I don't have many friends to begin with." Alex let Trix use the corner of her shirt to dry her tears. Connor turned bright red watching his sisters dispose of those tears so carelessly. He had to make the fairy produce more. "Being banned would really be terrible, though, wouldn't it?" Connor said. "You'd probably have to live in an old bird nest in the dwarf forest and be chased by wolves and witches every day. And that's only if an ogre doesn't capture you in a jar and barbecue you first." Trix started hysterically crying at this. "Connor, what's wrong with you?" Alex yelled. Connor snatched the vial from her hand and collected a tear from Trix's face just as it dripped off her chin. Alex gave him a dirty look. "Would you like us to go with you to your trial?" asked Alex, leaning down to be eye level with Trix. "For emotional support." "Yes, I would like that," Trix said. "That's so kind of you." "Well, I know what it feels like to think that the whole world is against you," Alex said. "We'd better get going. I don't want to be late." Trix flew into the air and fluttered down the path, and the twins walked right after her. "Alex, are you crazy?" Connor said. "We've got the tear. Now let's get out of here." "We're the only people in the world who this fairy has," Alex said. "We're going to be good people and help her out." Connor grunted with frustration. "Helping this fairy isn't going to take away any bad memories you have from school, Alex." Alex ignored him and followed Trix down the path. Connor followed, sulking the entire way. They traveled deeper into the fairy kingdom. Everything in the distance seemed to sparkle. They thought it was a mirage at first, but the closer they got, they saw that the trees, the grass, and the path all shimmered in the sunlight. "What's up with all the glitter?" Connor asked. "I don't think it's glitter. I think it's magic," Alex said. They reached the heart of the kingdom and were completely bewildered by what they saw. It was like they were standing in a gigantic tropical garden with large, colorful flowers of all shapes and sizes. There were weeping willows over small ponds and vines that grew across the ground and up the trees. There were beautiful bridges over many streams and ponds. There were fairies everywhere. Many flew around in the air, some just hovered over the ground, and the others walked on small paths adjacent to the one the twins were on. They were all different shapes and sizes and colors. Some were taller than Alex and Connor, some were small as Trix, and some didn't seem to even be solid, but rather made of pure light. There were just as many male fairies as there were female fairies. Some of the fairies wore gowns, other clothes made entirely of plant materials, and some wore nothing at all. Many had made miniature homes in the branches of the trees or in mushrooms on the ground, and there were fairies who even lived underwater with colorful fish. Something about this place made Alex feel as if everything were right in the world, and it gave her more hope, excitement, and happiness with every step she took. It was paradise. Have you ever seen something so beautiful in your entire life? Alex asked her brother. Not too shabby, Connor said. The Fairy Council operates in the Fairy Palace. It's just ahead, Trix said, and gestured to the twins to follow her over the pond. They, of course, took the bridge. They walked toward a palace made entirely out of golden arches and pillars. It was completely open. There were no more than 2 walls to line each room, and all the windows were tall with no glass. If they lived in a place this beautiful, who would want to keep all the environment out? Trix took the twins to the center of the palace into a long room with many seats facing the front. This would be the perfect place for a wedding, Alex said. At the front of the room were 7 fairies, Alex and Connor's size. They looked like a living rainbow. Each was dressed in a specific color, and they stood behind podiums positioned under an arch. That's the Fairy Council, Trix said. That's Rosette, the red fairy, Tangerina, the orange fairy, Zacius, the yellow fairy, Emeralda, the green fairy. She's mostly in charge. Skylene, the blue fairy, Violetta, the purple fairy, and Coral, the pink fairy. Rosette was short and plump and had very rosy cheeks. Tangerina was stylish and wore orange hair and a large beehive with actual bees flying over it. Zacius was male. He wore a shiny suit, and parts of him were ablaze. Emeralda was tall and beautiful. She was black and wore a long emerald dress and matched her eyes and jewelry. Skylene was very pale and had hair the color of the sky, flowing robes the color of the sea. Violetta was the oldest and had grayish purple hair, and Coral was the youngest, no more than a few years older than the twins in appearance, and wore a simple pink dress and had a pair of pink wings on her back. There were 2 empty seats on either side of the podiums. Who sits there? Alex asked Trix. The fairy godmother sits on the left and Mother Goose sits on the right, Trix said. They complete the Fairy Council, although they're rarely here. They're always traveling around the kingdom helping people. Is that you, Trix? Emeralda asked. Yes, I'm here, Trix peeped nervously and flew to the front of the podium. You're late. Please come forward, Emeralda said. She was gracious but authoritative, someone the twins would definitely want in their corner during an altercation. Trix, do you know why you've been called before the Fairy Council? Trix shamefully nodded her head. Yes, ma'am. Being a fairy requires a strong sense of responsibility, Tangerina said. Responsibility you haven't shown. Trix nodded some more and her eyes swelled with tears. I know, she squeaked. Unfortunately, we can't let your actions go unpunished. We need to make an example of you to reinforce the #1 rule of being a fairy. To never, under any circumstances, use your magic harmfully against another person, place, or thing. Unfortunately, there's only one thing for us to do. We have to banish you from the fairy kingdom. This Trix covered her eyes and wept harder than she had all day. I understand, she said through sobs. Whoa, 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 Connor yelled from the back. Hold on. Are you kidding me? Are you seriously going to ban her for making one little mistake? Connor asked the council with his hands on his hips. There was whispering and murmuring going on. They were appalled that someone would so openly question their judgment. Please don't try to help me, Trix whispered to Connor. Young man, who do you think you are? Said one of the fairies. Well, I'm just a kid, but even I can tell you that your ruling is ridiculous, Connor said. They all gasped, except for Emeralda, who kept her calm and imposing demeanor. Alex slapped an open palm against her forehead. How dare you, Tangerina said, and the bees swirling around her hair grew mad and flew faster around her head. You are out of line, Violetta said. How disrespectful, Coral said. How rude, Skylene said. Emeralda was the only member of the assembly to remain silent. She studied Connor with her emerald eyes. Silence, Emeralda ordered. She raised a hand and all her fellow assembly fairies went quiet. Let the boy speak. I want to hear what he has to say. Go ahead, young man. Connor wasn't sure if this was a trick or not, but he didn't hold back. Listen, I'm not a fairy, thank goodness, and I'm not perfect either. I try to be the best person or the best student possible, but every once in a while I slip up. I forget homework assignments or I fall asleep in class. My best effort isn't as good as someone else's might be, and no one should have the right to scold me or punish me publicly or humiliate me for it, Connor said. Trix knew what the rules were, and she was committed to offense against one of her peers, Rosette said. No one can be perfect, Connor said, and from what I hear, the guy had it coming. Where's his trial? Why isn't he here? Why do I always get detention for sleeping when in ancient Mesopotamia that should be punished for being so boring? The council continued to be outraged by this outburst. Many members didn't want to tolerate it and tried to leave. I hear what the child is saying, Emeralda said, but we can't just pardon Trix. We're the Fairy Council. It wouldn't send a good message to the rest of the kingdoms, Tangerina said. Look, Orange Lady, Connor said, in the last week, my sister and I have almost been eaten by a witch, narrowly missed being attacked by a pack of wolves, were almost killed by a bridge troll, survived a burning castle, and barely escaped a life of imprisonment in the troll and goblin territory. If you ask me, we've got bigger problems than a fairy turning somebody's wings into leaves. Looks to me like you busy yourselves with silly things. So if you feel like you're doing something, when in reality, you can't handle what's really going on out there. The council went silent and all the members appeared to become very concerned. Enslavement, Skylina said. You mean the trolls and goblins are still kidnapping and enslaving people? Yes, Connor said. There were dozens of us down there. We really could have used your help, but I guess you were too busy slapping fairies' wrists for playing pranks on one another. Although they held their expression, the council was secretly ashamed of themselves. Connor was right. They eyed one another for a moment before Emeralda broke the silence. On behalf of this council, I hereby forgive Trix for her crimes, Emeralda said. All of the other fairies and I will pay a visit to the Troll King and the Goblin King immediately, and furthermore, let this be a lesson to us all. The fairies nodded and then disappeared into the air with a pop. Thank you, Mr. Emeralda said. Wishington, Connor said. Connor Wishington. Emeralda smiled and then disappeared with the others. Trix flew up to Connor's face and gave him a huge hug. That's the bravest and nicest thing anyone's ever done for me, Trix said. Connor looked back at his sister. She was beaming with pride. She was so proud of her brother. It was a look Connor rarely got to see. You know, helping a fairy isn't going to take away any unhappy memories from school, Alex told him when she joined Connor and Trix near the podium. Connor shyly grinned. I had to say something. I would have regretted it if I hadn't. The remaining Fairy Council fairies began to leave. Some simply walked off and others disappeared into thin air, leaving behind sparkles and bubbles as they went. Coral was searching the room for something and patting her lap as she went. Here, Fisher. Where are you, Fisher? Coral said. A fish with 4 legs ran past Alex and Connor and jumped into Coral's arms. There you are, Coral said. It's just about time for your lunch. Alex and Connor looked at each other, confused, each wondering if the other had just seen it too. Is that what I think it is? Connor asked. I think so, Alex said. Coral was just about to leave when the twins stopped her. Excuse me, Alex said. Where did you get your fish? Oh, Fisher, Coral said. I dropped a wand in a lake once and granted him a wish after he swam down and got it for me. He wished for legs, silly thing, so he could play with some boy who lived in the village nearby. The boy ended up dying, sadly, so Fisher came to live with me. Coral's wings began to flap, and she flew away with her pet fish. So that was what we thought it was, Connor said. Yes, said Alex, her head spinning with questions. That was the walking fish from Dad's story. Next, we'll read Chapter 13 called A Wolf Pack. See you soon. Bye-bye.